thank you for joining us. Thank you to the organizers, Joe, Brian, and of course, my colleague, Dr. Waski. I wanted to speak about Frederick Douglass's life-transforming changes and battles. And of course, of everything, before we start, I have to mention that I collected all these notes some time ago when I was getting ready to publish Dismantling Slavery. But then as years passed, I started getting more and more information about Douglass, and the research still goes on. So we will talk about a variety of topics within an hour. We will mention Douglass's caring all his life for emancipation, for freedom, for voting rights, men and women, and then women's rights in marriage, in inheritance, in divorce. I believe in the 21st century, Frederick Douglass should be viewed by all scholars who are in our discipline as an outstanding and remarkable leader, a judicious leader, because of his honesty, because of his devotion, boundless energy, and determination to speak against some of the social ills that haunted 19th century America, both before and after the Civil War. So in this conversation, you will hear a lot about Douglass and Garrison and their friendship, as opposed to some of the myths. I think, and I honestly believe their friendship never ended. The one that started in 1841 continued until Garrison's death. And of course, he died before Douglass. And after they separated their ways, when Douglass went to Rochester, they continued writing letters to each other, and I have some copies of it. So in summary, my conviction is they kept each other enlightened, protected, and educated. This kind of long-lasting friendship is very rare, and when it is found, it has to be protected. So this is why I use the word, not now, but in the book, they kept each other enlightened, protected, and educated. So it was a mutual relationship. Another myth around the people who do not know much about them really is Garrison always was the mentor and Douglass was the student. No, it was always mutual. They educated each other. Douglass had life-transforming experiences, and we have to mention a couple of things. One of them is his self-education. I will not talk about his childhood when he was trying to learn the alphabet by gifts, but I'm really talking about the Columbian orator. The Columbian orator is the anthology, which I will speak about in the next slide, that he was very much into, because there were speeches, and he learned by reading these speeches how to develop his own skills as a successful orator. The second important factor is his escape in September 1838. And when he came, of course, through Philadelphia to Massachusetts, many things in his life changed. And of course, it was voluntary, but it impacted his future life as well. Then the other point, number 3, is his subscription to the Liberator, even before he met William Lloyd Garrison and anti-slavery activists. He became a subscriber with the little money he had in his pocket when he was working in at the shipyards in New Bedford. And he was not really doing very well in terms of his finances. He says about those early days when he was reading The Liberator, he says, "The paper became my meat and my drink. My soul was set on fire." This is very powerful. coming from the mouth of a former slave, it is really incredibly beautiful and very, very impressive. Then his meeting William Lloyd Garrison, which I recorded as number 4 in 1841 at Nantucket during an anti-slavery meeting, when he was prompted to speak about who he is, and he shows his back to the audience and he says, "I have my diploma on my back," showing them the marks, the scars of the maybe several whippings he had throughout his young life. The fifth point is, of course, him becoming an abolitionist. So I divided, as you see on the slide, the Liberator, his meeting Garrison in Boston, to those 6 years, 1841, 1847, then his second stage when he became an independent editor and independent activist, when he went to Rochester to publish the North Star. And then the paper, of course, converts into Douglas's paper. He's still in Rochester. His overseas trips had another impact on him because he met during those 2 years several people in Britain and in Ireland, which these meetings with those important people shaped his future life as a speaker and developed his skills. His devotion to voting rights, 1848, which was coinciding with the Seneca Falls Convention, and he joining the convention as one of the 40 men. Some sources say it was only 32 men, but Douglas was one of them. And then the last point I want to make about his life-transforming experiences, other than these 5 categories at the top, is his rewriting and revising his autobiographies. 3 of them, almost 3 times, 1845, 47, 1881, still revising until 1892, which was the last one, Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. The Columbian Orator, let me spend a few seconds about this book, was an anthology published in 1797. About this book, or the anthology, which contains famous speeches by famous people, written by Caleb Bingham, he says, "Every opportunity I got, I used to read this book." So it is not a coincidence that Douglas became such an avid reader and a great speaker. He says, with his own words, that he learned everything from this book. The book had several speeches, one from George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and even some speeches reportedly by Socrates and Cato, although Socrates never wrote anything, but he dictated and his pupils, his students, recorded. This book was used popularly from 1790 to 1820 in schools, American schools. The book had another important quality. It celebrated and reiterated the Republican virtues, promoted patriotism, and it also questioned the ethics of slavery. Douglas had purchased a copy of this book when he was quite young, 12 years old. The Liberator, as you see the masthead, of course, became Douglas's initiation right to becoming an activist. He was hired by the American Anti-Slavery Society after that initial meeting at Nantucket Island, and he was traveling, giving public lectures and speaking about his own experiences as a former slave. Meanwhile, being a subscriber to the Liberator was feeding him more and more information about what to do, what to say, and how to proceed about this new career. He was really on his way to achieve fame and skills as a seasoned orator. We also know that between 1841 and 47, he wrote some editorials for the Liberator, which were published in Boston. Some of the resources say he was the co-editor of the Liberator, but we see that he was contributing editorials rather than being the co-editor of this very important anti-slavery newspaper. His transatlantic journeys has to be mentioned, and this is probably one of the most pleasant experiences he had, although he experienced some problems on the voyage, and I will mention these. Um, when his last, no, when his first autobiography was published, by the way, I have a note to share with you. I brought this up in my former lectures and in my classrooms that we should never call them slave narratives, although this is how the white anthologies have approached anything written by an African American or an African person. They used to say slave narratives, although it had nothing to do with being a narrative of a enslaved person. It was an autobiography. So this is why I started calling Douglass's life stories autobiographies, and I hope you adopt the same attitude, whether you are in the classroom or at family circle. So the transatlantic journeys began because in 1845, when his first autobiography was published, it exposed who Douglass was. It spoke about his identity. He had, of course, changed his name from Augustus Bailey to Frederick Douglass. He also exposed his owners' names so they would easily come after him. Upon the recommendation of William Lloyd Garrison, he decided to go to Europe and spend maybe a few months. But the trip, of course, which started from this side of the Atlantic until it reached the other side of the ocean, experienced some very interesting, what should I say, some experiences on his way to Ireland and Britain. I tried to find exactly the picture of Cumbria, and I came across this one that my arrow is on. It says Cumbria, 1845. And then this one mentions the captain's name, who was Judkins, who was on the ship that day, who was the captain of Cumbria. But I combined both of them in this slide just to give you some ideas. One more myth that I would like to mention before I speak about what happened on the, what happened on the ship. People speak about Garrison and Douglass in a very different way than I perceive them. They keep claiming, some of the resources claim that they broke up after 1847 when Douglass said he's leaving Boston. This is not really true because they kept communicating, even, of course, in Europe. Because Douglass was sent to Europe to be protected, and Garrison was the first and the only motivator of this. He wanted him to be safe. So they kept writing to each other. I want to emphasize the point. This is why you are looking at this slide. Each time Douglass wrote to Garrison, he would use these words, "My dear friend Garrison," and then he would end yours, or sincerely yours, or dedicated to you. I have seen many, many letters from Douglass and some letters from Garrison because most of the letters were destroyed in a fire. So we have many letters from Douglass, but not many letters from Garrison. This friendship and this kind of dedication to each other with respect never stopped. Their families, their wives and children were also in great relationships. So I have to reiterate that fact. The Irish connection, I will come back to the ship and the events on the ship, but let me go over this. As I said before, there was lots of chaos after the first autobiography was published. The Southerners in the summer of 1845 called the autobiography as a catalogue of lies, whereas the Northerners said It is the most thrilling work which the American press has ever issued, and the most important. As I said before, the autobiography revealed his true identity. He was no longer Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey for this reason. He had a new name, but his owner was Thomas Old, and everybody could easily find Douglas. So America being so unsafe, they chose him to be away in Europe for almost a year and keep speaking about slavery. Garrison had always a watchful eye on his friend, and he said, this autobiography will be published also in Ireland by my friend Richard Webb, who is a Quaker printer in Dublin, the book was published in Ireland, and Webb always kept an eye on Douglas to protect him and accepted him into his own family as a good friend because he was the head of the anti-slavery lobby in Dublin and in Ireland. An interesting fact about Douglas, when Douglas was speaking in Ireland and in Britain, he wanted to embarrass Americans in America. This was probably also the effect of the treatment he received on the ship from the white passengers. So he was speaking about America being not a good place for anybody, let alone a former slave. And he was comparing his experience with the favorable treatment he had received in England and in Ireland. He kept saying in almost all of his speeches that slavery and racism have to be eradicated because they were persistent problems and it interfered with America's democratic principles, which were the cardinal virtues of life, liberty, freedom of expression. So he became an anti-American when he was overseas, which is an interesting fact. This ship, I think, was very important in his life, not as a life-transforming change, but an important incident which reiterated one more time for Frederick Douglass and his friends that slavery continues even in the middle of an ocean. The ship was built in 1844, and it was one of the most modern ships of the Cunard line, which carried mail between Boston and Liverpool. It was 219 feet long. It was a wooden, modern paddle steamer. It would travel the ocean in less than 2 weeks, a journey that usually took more than a month in the former days. The Cambria could carry 120 passengers because it was also carrying mails. It was a tight and small ship. Most of the space was allocated to engines and coal, and the passengers and their comforts were not of priority. So when you think about a transatlantic ship, do not think that it was like Titanic. It was really very rough, a wooden boat. With a first-class ticket, Douglas boarded the ship on 16 August 1845. Unfortunately, he could never see inside his cabin because he was not allowed to use that first-class cabin. Instead, by the account of some of the people on the ship, he was mistreated by many of the passengers, who were doctors, lawyers, soldiers, and sailors, and bishops, some Quakers, and among them, there were people from Canada, a diplomat from Spain, as well as slaveholders from Cuba and Georgia. He was insulted many times. He was threatened to be thrown overboard. The majority of the white passengers didn't want to see him on the upper deck. And then there was a fight, almost a fight. He was accompanied by James Buffin, who was from Lynn, Massachusetts. He tried to interfere. And then the captain came and he stopped everybody and he sent a warning. And he said, nobody will be thrown off this boat. And Mr. Douglas has a right to be on the upper deck every morning for fresh air. And rest of the time, Buffum and Douglas were sent to another room, which is not necessarily the first class, but they made it. They made it to Dublin. And it was the start of a 4-month tour. It was one of the most transformative periods of his life. On Cambria, he had other friends, other than the captain who really protected him. There were this, I have to skip to the next slide because you will hear more about this family, the Singers, Hutchinsons. They were really very radical people, and they were on the ship for a tour of Europe. They were the ones who defended and protected Douglas more than anyone else. Here is this musical family, their sister and 3 men. They were originally more crowded. They had few more members of the family, but on the ship there were only 4 of them. These people were singing songs on social issues. Probably we can call them folk singers with today's standards. And they were defending causes like women's suffrage and prohibition of alcohol, the temperance movement, and they opposed to slavery and to the Mexican-American War at the same time. So the Hutchinsons became Douglas's best friends, even on the ship, although they knew him before that. In Ireland, Douglas met and admired the Irish leader, Daniel O'Connell, who was a nationalist, and he was known as the liberator of Ireland. This statue is him in Dublin, and Daniel O'Connor, of course, was admired by Frederick Douglass. He wanted to be like Daniel O'Connor, and he met the gentleman too. When he met Daniel O'Connell, Douglas himself was either 27 or 28 years old, but O'Connell was almost 70 years old. He was still speaking about bringing independence to Ireland. From him, during their conversations, and they met more than once, Douglas borrowed a phrase which he used for the rest of his life many, many times: agitate, agitate, agitate. In his speeches, when there were questions to him about what shall we do, this was coming from, of course, anti-slavery congregations, he would always say, agitate, keep continuing to agitate. As I mentioned before, Richard Davis Webb was a Dublin printer. Here's his picture. I included him because he was very supportive of Douglas when he was in Dublin. This gentleman later wrote a book on Captain John Brown, which of course was a friend of Douglas. Charles Lennox Remond, coming from an abolitionist family, he was also in Europe, and Douglas met him, of course, there, and they were good friends. John Brown, from my previous research, I know they met, the two met before Brown started his attack on Harper's Ferry, and he took advice from Douglas, but Douglas was saying, you know what, you have to stop this. This is crazy. You will be killed, and you should not attack Harper's Ferry. In this format, you have only a little group with you. You can't do this. But Brown did not pay much attention. He was adamant about his plan. So this is what we know about Douglas and Brown. I also read in one of the sources years ago that because the authorities found out Douglas met John Brown before the attack on Harper's Ferry, 1859, summer months. Of course, the attack happened later, a little bit later. Douglas left United States one more time, and he spent some months in Europe because of this. I'm not sure if this was the cause, but Douglass was very much threatened with his life. Let's talk about his North Star years. When he decided to establish his own newspaper, the white abolitionists were shocked. Those people who supported him all the time knew that after his return, Douglass was not the same man. He was now a free man because the female abolitionists in Britain had helped him purchase his free papers. They had collected enough money to pay Hugh Auld, AULD, $711 to purchase Douglass's freedom. After this arrival, 1847, abolitionists were quite upset about his change of heart. They tried to understand, but they were also upset that he was leaving Boston and starting his own newspaper. For Douglass, let's look at it from this perspective. For Douglass, it was the beginning of a new life. He was a free individual. He could speak with freedom. He was determined to follow his own heart, his own mind. The people who helped him purchase his freedom were Ellen and Anna Richardson. If I forgot to mention their names, Ellen and Anna Richardson. Having accomplished all his goals, now he's ready to create a new image for himself. Now he was no longer going to be supported by Garrison. And in the early days of his speech making, he was always approached by Garrison's assistants to say this and not to say that. And he noted in his autobiography that there were always people whispering to his ear, and he didn't like that very much. So now he was free of all these problems. In Rochester, 1847, he establishes his own paper. Right is of no sex, truth is of no color, God is the Father of us all, and we are all brethren. This was the masthead of the North Star. He was very proud, and this is the first issue, I believe, because he says we are now about to assume the management of the editorial department. It's a historic piece of material. This one is much later, also in Rochester, on a Friday, August 11, 1848. But this is exactly what it looked like. It was published once a week. It was sold by a subscription of $2 per year and distributed to more than 4,000 readers, not only in America, but in America, Europe, and the Caribbean. I find those numbers amazing. For $2 per year, you are distributing this to 4,000 subscribers throughout the world, America, Europe, and the Caribbean. For this paper, Douglass cooperated and collaborated with Martin Delany. Martin Robinson Delany, born in 1812, was a very complicated man, a brilliant man who even attended medical school, a brilliant man who wrote books and even a novel, and who spoke about the evils of slavery each time, became friendly with Douglass. And this friendship became important for both of them, mutually beneficial, but it continued only 18 months and it fell apart. The reason being, Delany, who was also a man of the military, was in support of immigration to Africa. And this ideology of immigrating to Africa didn't sit well with Frederick Douglass and the people who were thinking like him. So Douglass, after 18 months, realized that there are differences between them and their differing views will not benefit his paper. So he abandons this collaboration. It's really very complicated. I won't go into details, but he changes the name of his paper to Douglas's paper too at the same time. I think I said almost everything I want to say about this relationship. Then he was ready. Okay, this is, I think I mentioned that. I can skip that. Let's see what's next. One of the criticisms directed to Frederick Douglass was that he defended voting rights for Blacks, but only for Black men. There are several factors which impacted his decision, and I'm not in a position to defend him or to criticize him. But let me tell you what happened. In July 1848, he attends the Seneca Falls Convention upon invitation, where white women had gathered for the first time to speak about their demand, which is voting. But Black women activists are not and were not invited. So that was a problem at all times. Then in April of 1865, we hear him addressing the annual meeting of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, emphasizing the need for immediate and unconditional enfranchisement for Black men. He argued 1 month later that suffrage was essential for securing civil rights and political consent for just laws. In 1883, he is still delivering a speech titled "Why Hold a Colored Convention?" to discuss the importance of Black activism and the need for full voting rights. And December of 1888, he is still protesting against the voting rights not given to Black voters, but still highlighting men rather than women. So in each of his speeches and writings, although he is in support of full enfranchisement, he is still saying men first. There are many reasons for this. He was not, I will never call him a sexist. He was never discriminating against women because he always supported women's presence. But he believed, this is, I think, the bottom line. He believed if Black men who had been so much denigrated and so much abused and criminalized, if Black men are saved from this very humbling situation, they would have a better hold in Black family, and they would be able to help their wives and their children, and the family unit will be restored once again. So this was for him a social, cultural issue, at the same time a political issue. We see Douglass in defense of women's rights, not only for Black women, but for white women. And one of the reasons why I say this is he was one of the few men who were invited to speak at Seneca Falls in 1848. The white leaders, Lucretia Coffin Mott, the Quaker leader, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were in attendance. I found some beautiful pictures of some of these women, which I had not seen before. So I wanted to share one of these with you. Not necessarily this one, but this drawing depicts the Seneca Falls Convention, which I believe I didn't mention. There were around 200 women. Another resource says 300 women, but only a couple of men were able to speak, and one of them was Frederick Douglass, although they attended as a group of either 30, 32, or 40. This picture of James and Lucretia Mott, husband and wife from, of course, Old York Road, Philadelphia, is very common. But I had never seen Elizabeth Cady Stanton with her children. This is with two of her 3 sons. We always see Elizabeth Cady Stanton as a woman who has matured and ages either 50, 60, but this is a younger Cady Stanton, which I wanted to share with you. Declaration of Sentiments, of course, was important. landmark for women's rights. And I believe after this time, things were different in America. The dates were, of course, July 19 to 20, and they came up with a Declaration of Sentiments after this time, which is historic for our students to understand that women's rights did not really come very quickly. But in my opinion, it all started with, World Anti-Slavery Society's Convention in 1840, where women were excluded. They could not attend any of the meetings, and they were told to sit behind a curtain. This is what it looked like. And women, although you see some women here, most of them could not really enter the main hall during the discussions. This is another drawing depicted, whether it is truthful or not. At least it gives us an idea of the enormous hall and the number of people who attended. Oh. My apologies. I'm so sorry. Give me a minute, please. When I was trying to conclude my slides, I said, how about Camp William Penn? I'm talking to JAR Museum, and I have to mention Camp William Penn and Douglas. He visited the camp in July of 1863. And he told Philadelphians, when he was addressing them, to enlist in the Union Army. As we know, Douglas was a great recruiter for the Union Army. And this is what he said. It's a long speech, but I only copied this much. Young men of Philadelphia, you are without excuse. The hour has arrived and your place is in the Union Army. He was able to recruit many people in addition to his own sons. Of course, I'm sure he did not have to recruit them. He told them to join the Civil War. Lewis enlisted in the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. He served as the sergeant major, and he was wounded during the Fort Wagner attack, 1863. Frederick Jr. also joined the 54th Massachusetts, becoming one of the first African-American soldiers who joined the group. He later transferred to the 5th Massachusetts Cavalry, where he was promoted to first surgeon. There are so many interesting things that we do not know, really. Newly emerging research tells us several things are happening. The other day, I heard from one of my colleagues who teaches in the same department with me, Dr. Sonia Peterson-Lewis, who is from Florida. She said her great-great-grandfather learned how to read and write because of those teachers who came after the Civil War to the South. And he also served at a unit under the command of Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother. That information really thrilled me, and I am going to do more research, but can you imagine Harriet Beecher Stowe, we know as Uncle Tom's Cabin author, and her brother go to the South, to the very South, and becomes a commanding officer. And my colleague's great-great-grandfather serves in that unit and survives the war. Camp William Penn, a very old picture. I cannot read the details. Douglas spent, this is my final slides. I'm about to end my conversation with you today. In his 54 years as a public spokesman, Douglass spoke against slavery, injustice, and unfreedom. For me, this term is so precise. Unfreedom. It really was used first by Douglass. Then the 20th century author and speaker Angela Davis adopted it, and she popularized this term. But it was really Douglass who first used it in one of his speeches on freedom. Anyway, he gave 2,000 speeches. He revised 3 of his autobiographies. He wrote hundreds of articles, essays, and letters. He favored the US Constitution despite some issues he had. And one of the, of course, issues he had with the Constitution was it should be amended to end slavery, which never happened. Although, of course, we are talking about 13, 14, 15 amendments, which happened later. He still, I'm saying this for one purpose, because Garrison was against the US Constitution all his life. He called it a pro-slavery document, whereas Douglass argued each time with Garrison and said, no, it is not pro-slavery. It is a good document which has some problems and it can be corrected. I think Douglass was more realistic than radical William Lloyd Garrison, because he believed that democracy would heal this nation. If it were not for Frederick Douglass, who exposed the social ills of his era by speaking, writing, and acting, including inequality in women's rights and voting, America would still remain false to her own founding principles: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, justice. So in my view, with his belief that democracy will be healing this nation, Douglass changed the American landscape forever. This ends my lecture, but I thank you very much for listening, and I apologize for my coughing. I'm trying to recover from a bad cold. I thank you very much. I'm here for your questions, if you have any.
That was very great, very, very good. I thank you so much. I'll start off with a couple of my own and an observation. I just wanted to give everybody a reminder: if you have a question, you can hit the raise your hand emoji, and I'll see it right away. It'll stick up. And also, you could put it in the chat if you want me to read anything in particular, or you could just do the good old-fashioned jump on in. Um, one of the things that stick out to me with Frederick Douglass was his cool head, his steady hand. Not losing his cool in the ship, things like that, which could have gotten him killed very easily. And his discussions with Garrison about the Constitution, and also with John Brown, trying to be the cool head in the room. And I think that's probably why he's so well remembered. I wanted to ask about the North Star. How often was that published? I knew nothing about this publication.
Weekly, once a
Weekly.
week.
Very
Yes.
good. And was that primarily where his income came from?
Well, he was also a hired speaker for anti-slavery before he left Boston. But after he left Boston, this time he was surrounded by Black activists and Black anti-slavery supporters. So they were contributing to his income when they wanted him to speak. So Douglass, of course, had also had some money because of the publication of his first autobiography by that time, not only in America, but also in Europe. So he had some income coming to his help.
Very good. And I wanted you to speak a little bit about the immigrating to Africa movement. Like, what was the idea behind the people who supported this, and what were the criticisms for that? Obviously.
That's a good question. It really has a very long history, and I'm not sure if I can indulge into it, but it was not Martin Delaney's idea. It existed among African American minds long before. In 1820s, for instance, there was a big movement among African Americans who were free African Americans, of course, living in the North, like Boston, Philadelphia. This debate about should we leave instead of, enduring this trouble. We are free people, free blacks, and they are rich and wealthy people. Most of them are, like the Fortin family in Philadelphia and others in Boston and in New York. They wanted to get rid of this humbling feeling of being the second-class citizen, despite their wealth and despite their identity. So this was a big debate, but it never found enough supporters. Only a handful of people would agree to go. As a matter of fact, a group left, and this was the beginning of this country and nation known as Liberia being founded by those who traveled to Africa. So if you look into Liberia's history, you will find that it was established by African Americans or Africans who lived in America and who were free people who could travel, of course, and leave the US in order to establish a new land, a new country. But as I said, in 1820s and 30s, despite this colonization exodus, which David Walker, I'm not sure if you know about David Walker, but David Walker was a free man, a tailor in Boston. In 1829, there is a pamphlet being circulated in the North and also in the South secretly. And this pamphlet talks about 4 evils against Africans. And one of those evils is the colonization project. And David Walker, who we believe wrote this a beautiful pamphlet of 85 pages and was able to secretly send it to the South with his friends who were captains and sailors. And you know what they would do? This is also another interesting topic. You inspired me, Brian. Thank you. They would put this pamphlet into the lining of their coats and jackets. I'm talking about captains, black captains and sailors who would carry this pamphlet with them secretly. And for instance, it would surface in Georgia. It would surface somewhere in the South at the wharfs and the piers, and people would be reading this secretly. I'm talking about black people. And it said, there are 4 problems with America nowadays. One of them is slavery. The other one is lack of education, because it's blaming whites, saying you did not let us learn how to read and write, so you kept us in a wretched situation. As a matter of fact, that word is exactly the same word that was used by many people who were attacking the slavery as a system. The wretchedness of Africans are because of you. So education, religion, which they called Christianity. David Walker spoke about this Christianity at length. He also blamed colonization. So these factors were written in this 85-page pamphlet, and it was like a manifesto. The governors in the South were alarmed. They wanted to find who wrote this, who sent this. They couldn't, of course, because my understanding is that David Walker, a black man who was selling used clothing in his store, a free man in Boston, were in good terms and great friendship with William Lloyd Garrison. And Garrison was the one in those days who had the means to print any document because he had a printing shop. So David Walker wrote the draft. Garrison went over the draft because we detect some of Garrison's words in his pamphlet. And then it was published by Garrison. And with the collaboration of a few people, not many, they were secretly able to send this to the South and, of course, to Boston and Philadelphia. Guess what happened? as David Walker was getting ready to publish it for a second time with an edited version, he was found dead in front of his house. So David Walker's heroic pamphlet was, of course, was not lost. It became one of the historic documents. I teach this in my classroom, in my graduate class, and students can't believe this, but it was so beautiful. It was probably the first manifesto against slavery. It talks about colonization, and the project did not take off. It failed because only a handful of people supported this idea. David Walker was criticizing colonization, and he kept saying, this is our land. This is where we were born. We will not leave America. America is our future. And he was right. So this is how I would respond to your question. I'm sorry it was a little long.
Oh, great. Yeah, I would imagine that people who supported it maybe didn't realize how hard it probably would have been to assimilate. I mean, being Americans and then going back to Africa, it's the cat's out of the bag. It's just this is where you're at, and this is the easiest life is going to be forward. And luckily for that, it brought us the America we have today in progress. So, rather than they just all leave.
I'm glad not many people went.
That's right.
This is how we had such a rich heritage and deep knowledge of African American achievements. And if they had all left, we wouldn't have African American doctors, teachers, inventors, scholars, So the majority
we wouldn't be better.
remained.
Okay. We have many thanks in the chat here. We thank you so much. He was a very interesting man. I've read some things about him and his relationship with Lincoln. Interesting studying his great speeches. Michael Hill would like you to comment on Douglas's 4th of July speech given on the 5th in 1852. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, of course. It's about the dark clouds. Are you still able to see my screen? I'm trying to find that flyer that Andy wanted me to find. I hope I can find it. I'm listening.
You'll have to delete your PowerPoint and then go to the web, your what's it what's it called? Your screen, and click on the flyer.
Click on the flyer.
As a shared screen.
Yeah, I want to do that before many people start leaving the conference.
Yeah, please.
But
and then make a few comments about.
Yes, I will. I will. This is the speech that this audience member is asking about the 4th of July.
Yeah, supposedly it's called the 4th of July speech, but it was given on the 5th.
Okay, and what's the question?
Just, I wanted you to comment on it. I guess maybe a takeaway or something.
Well, I wish I had the text of the speech right here on my desk, but I don't. And although it's a good speech that I use once in a while in my classrooms, I can say, without looking at the text, I can say a few things if you don't mind. Of course, the 4th of July speech is important for all of us, because as America was celebrating its birthday, Douglas says, look at us, and the year is 1852, right? Look at us, we are still kept in bondage. And although I'm not in bondage, we know that his freedom came in 1847, thanks to those activists in Britain. He says, look at us, 1852, we are still in this shape. America cannot do this. He targets America, as he did many, many years ago, and he says America should be true to its promise. I didn't read you this, but I can connect two speeches with another speech he gave in 1847, as early as 1847. He gave this speech to American Anti-Slavery Society. It's called The Right to Criticize American Institutions. It really shares the same keynote address and the same message with the 1852 speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. He says, it is not a heartwarming speech. It is really an attack on America, which had enslaved the Black men and women. He said, I went to England. Remember, this is May of 1847. He went and he came back. He says, I went to England, the monarchical England, to get rid of democratic slavery. I went to England, the monarchical England, to get rid of democratic slavery. I have no love for America as such. I have no patriotism. I have no country. The institutions of this country do not know me, do not recognize me as a man. He continues, how can I love a country, the church of which, and the government, and the constitution of which is in favor of, one second please, in favor of supporting and perpetuating this monstrous system of injustice and blood? Douglass was expressing his feelings, and his, of course, mental situation is perfect. He says he wanted to see the government to be overthrown as fast as possible. He says this in the speech, as fast as possible, and the Constitution to be shivered in 1,000 fragments, rather than this foul curse should continue to remain as now. I want this government to be overthrown as speedily as possible, and its constitution to be shivered in 1,000 fragments, rather than this foul curse should continue to remain as now. This was in 1847, as soon as he returned from overseas. And of course, the What to the Slave came in 1852. So he's still in the same mindset. He is attacking America for not taking care of the slavery issue. Because imagine, he has great trust in America. He loves the country. He wants the democracy to flourish. But at the same time, he says, this one thing has to be corrected and redeemed. As long as it is continuing, we cannot talk about a democratic America. And he compares it with England, which he says monarchical, the king and the queen. He seems to favor them as opposed to America. And of course, Douglass was a very clever speaker. He uses lots of satires, cynicisms, metaphoricals. One of the most powerful metaphors he uses in his speeches continuously is water. He uses the image of the ocean. He uses the sound of the water.
I'm sorry, what did you want to say?
The valleys, metaphorically, very powerful. So this is one of the things he repeats. The Constitution has perfect qualities, but this one thing has to be cured. I'm not sure if I was able to respond to your question, but he, in 1852, 4th of July speech, he questions the audience very cleverly, and he says, why did you call me here? I have no room here. I have no place. I see nothing but dark clouds in the horizon. And of course, he was indicating the Civil War. He was on a prophecy, and he said, if this goes on, there will be a clash. And he was right. 1852, 1866, 8 years later, and after John Brown was hanged, everything came head on. So that is a beautiful speech that I love. And these words from his former speech echoes the same sentiment and the same message.
Thank you for sharing that, your insight on that.
Sure.
John asked, wasn't Lincoln a supporter of this colonization? I heard something similar to that. Is there any truth to that? Lincoln,
I'm not sure about that. I'd rather not respond because I do not have full knowledge of what Lincoln said about colonization. I have to look back again into that. But
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, as Andy will agree, there are many things said about Abraham Lincoln, although in my own perception and in my own learning, in a humble way, I think he was a great leader and a very good president.
Yeah, and at a perfect time. If anybody else has anything else, Andy, if you want to hop back in and just talk about this event you have coming up, Noga, if you have
First,
anything you want to say about that.
yes, I'm gonna try to. Please forgive me. I will look into my email and I'll find one of the flyers that I sent to one of my colleagues or students. So please, I'm gonna find it and open it so you can share it without me closing the share, because if I close it, I may not be able to catch up again. So please bear with me. Let me try to see this thing.
Mindy, would you like to ask a question? I see you have your hand up.
Yes. I actually, not a question, but just a comment with regards to that last discussion about Lincoln and the colonization. Lincoln actually was a member of the colonization organizations prior to his presidency, and it was something that he definitely was interested in. But throughout his presidency, he was learning more about how the African Americans actually felt about it. And through speaking with them, he actually became educated that this was not something that the African Americans were interested in, that they wanted to be incorporated into society and did not want to have to leave the United States. So through speaking to African Americans, Lincoln grew, as we all knew that he grew with his views on many things throughout those incredible 4 years. And so he came to learn that that was not something to advocate for, that's why emancipation and the 13th Amendment really became his passion.
Mindy, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a
Sure.
great thing for us to look into and all. Andy, I see you have your hand up. You want to jump in? Let's see if he's.
By the way, Brian, can you see the screen now? Is there
No.
Okay.
No?
No, but I do have Andy. I think I can see. Go ahead, Andy.
I'm sorry. I'm returning to the conference that we sponsored. It's our 23rd year. We've been doing this and exploring all aspects of Black history, Underground Railroad, Emancipation era, the Civil War, participation of the United States colored troops, et cetera, et cetera. We focused on that and continue to. And this year we have Nilgun can speak about. We have several speakers and a panel. And two of the speakers are local, and that would be Professor Don Scott, who has written a number of books. The latest book is about the Monteer family, a socially elite abolitionist, Black abolitionist family. They were very, very closely related. Oh, there it is, to the Fortons, and they were very, very, very much involved in the emancipation issue. And then Ed McLaughlin, pardon me, who has done an enormous amount of research on the United States colored troops, the USCT, as they call them, from the era and the area. And he is going to talk about his research and his work, and I'm sure you're going to be enjoying that. So there are just two. And then Nilgun, I know you could speak about Professor Jordan from Lincoln University, maybe. So I'm turning it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay. Andy, thank you. Can you see the flyer on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. As Andy mentioned, our keynote speaker is Dr. Jordan Denson, a graduate of my own department. As a matter of fact, when he was defending his dissertation, I was his advisor. He's going to talk about this all-African town, Hinsonville, and which was, of course, established by those people who escaped the South. Then we have, as Andy mentioned, Donald Scott, whose book on Camp William Penn is an interesting and very powerful research guide, as well as Ed McLaughlin, who also wrote books on Camp William Penn. We didn't have any more room on the flyer. We didn't want to make this beautiful image of probably Harriet Tubman holding the lantern. We didn't want to minimize it, so we used the space more for the image than the names. Yeah, if you can please come, we would be very happy. There's no entrance fee. Admission is free and open to all. February 25th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have, as I said, 3 speakers. Then one of my students will read a poem he wrote for this purpose. And we have a panel that's being also organized by undergraduate students and graduate students, because I tempted them and I said, this is always done by scholars. Why don't you also join us? So at 2 p.m., the last section of the program is about the panel. But as I said, if you don't have all day, come in the morning at 10 and stay until 12. You will hear at least 2 speakers. We will be very happy to have you. The location is the 10th floor of Gladfelter Hall. At the entrance, they will ask you to sign your name and tell the guard at in the building why and where you are going. So that's all. We will be happy to have you. This is our 23rd year. We started this conference with Dr. Woski 23 years ago. Our first meeting was very quickly arranged. The first conference, we invited Dr. Blockson to be our speaker. He came. He was very kind. He came, but he also scolded me, especially scolded me, and said, who are you to do research on Underground Railroad? And, 23 years ago, I didn't know many things. Maybe he was right, but I wish he had been more encouraging. But we did not stop, right, Andy? We
That's
continued.
True. Yes.
And Andy has always
he wanted
been.
proprietorship, I guess, of the whole concept.
Andy has started a beautiful tradition. He gives certificates to speakers in beautifully framed documents are kept by these speakers forever. I have one that he gave me many years ago. So in short, I'm very happy that my colleague and friend, dear friend, Andy Woski has supported us with this conference every year. I hope it goes on for a long, long time. I hope he's healthy this year and we continue. I also thank GAR Museum for inviting me to speak for them every year. Let me stop sharing so I can talk to you now that everybody has seen. Has everybody seen the flyer? I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see you. Okay, how do I do that? Stop sharing. Okay.
Good. Yes.
So I can see you. All right, or you can see me. This was really an honor. I thank you very much. And Andy, Joe Perry, and Brian from the museum. What else can I say? Do you have other questions? I have probably a little bit more time left. Like one more question.
I have questions.
Yeah, Bernice, go ahead, speak up.
Yes. First of all, this was an excellent presentation. She has spoken here before, and I've always been fascinated with her. Excuse me, I'm just a little shaky myself here, but she speaks clearly, and the information that she gave today was a lot new to me. And I have a question. I have a copy here, which I can find in my books here, of the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And you, Professor, said that he altered it several times. I can't find it, so I don't know the date on it, but I assume they're all basically the same, correct?
Yes, they are. 1845 is the one officially that's published, and he edited that one several times. He was a perfectionist, and since he learned how to read and write himself, I think he had more he was more self-conscious than a normally educated person at a schoolroom. So he would go back and edit the spelling issues, grammar, and he would add a few more things that he remembered. But basically, if you have one copy, that's exactly what it is. But I appreciate Bernice. Thank you. Let's educate our friends and our younger
You're
students.
wonderful. You speak beautifully, but you offer such fascinating details. I took about 10 pages of notes here. I always, and
Oh.
let's see, anyway, my little brain will remember it. But it was just fascinating. It was a great day. Thanks to you.
Bernice, thank you. You are extremely kind. I appreciate everything you said. If I was clear, if you could hear me well, I'm glad, because that's another problem I have with other speakers. You can hardly understand, so I always turn on the closed captions when I'm listening to someone. This time I forgot. I wish someone had reminded me. But at one time, this group was 52 people, which is great. And I'm so glad I was able to speak to 50, 30, 10. At one time, as Andy will remember, we had very little interest in Underground Railroad, and now it has become an official topic, especially for Temple, because we are the only university and the only department that carried on an academic research-oriented lecture series for 23 years. We have to do a bigger celebration at 25th year. Hopefully we will do something better and bigger for all of you, and we will invite all of you.
Nilgun, we own the Underground Railroad.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we will not give it up, and we will not forget. So we will keep doing research, and with your support, things will perk up, and we will do more learning, more educational programs.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and go enjoy the rest of your Sunday. It's beautiful out, except it's still cold and still lots of snow and all. But thanks again for coming and sharing with us, and thank you for letting us record, because it's not just the 50 that we get, but the people who couldn't come. And there was a few events today where people had told me they said they couldn't come today. So you will be much more available to everybody, and that's why we love it when our guests allow us to record and we can make that available. So once again, thank you everybody. God bless.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. All right, bye bye now.
Brian, send me a copy of the recording, please.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube. I'll send you a link to the YouTube channel, and you can actually see last year's one, which I know you missed. And then that was one that I edited. And then now we actually hire someone now to do the edits. People will notice that the videos have changed at some point. They didn't quite look the same. So this year, it usually takes a few weeks, and then yours, the one from today, will pop up. And I'll go ahead and send that to you before I exit my computer. Okay?
What did I speak to this group last year? Did you record?
You sure did. This time last year, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really?
Exactly a year.
I have a link for that copy as well.
Yeah, I sure do, and I will send it to you.
Please resend whatever you have for me, because I would love to look at myself on YouTube. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Just as lovely as this time, I can tell you that. So, all right. Bye, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Take care. Stay warm.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye.